so essentially we have a lot of different programs. We have a technical track for developers. We have a lot of projects that we hand people to really get you immersed in the technology. We also have hiring partners that we work with so that once you come through the program, we help you get a job. And we also have collab labs, so after you come through the course, you just go and start building out projects. So, slide. And we also are announcing our partnership with UCI Extension, where we will be teaching Ethereum engineering to college students. Okay, and I'd also like to introduce our sponsors for tonight. Jerry from Tech Futures. So Tech Futures is a really awesome place where they'll give you advice for your small tech business, and I'll hand this over to Jerry.
Okay, so I guess I asked you to move forward. Okay, let me just give you, let me tell you a little bit about Tech Futures Group. So we're a nonprofit that provides free business advice. There it is, thank you. There we go. We're a program of small business development centers, which is a program funded by the SBA in the different states. There are 1,000 of them nationwide, and they focus on Main Street businesses. We focus exclusively on tech businesses. We don't take equity, and we don't accept cash, so our services are completely free to you. However, we are funded by the SBA and the state of California, so everybody on our side gets paid. So the way it works is you apply to Tech Futures Group. We accept applications as early as an idea stage, so a researcher who has a technology, doesn't have a product, doesn't have a company, doesn't have perhaps team members, just them, and they don't have a product market fit. So we'll take it very, very early all the way to a company that's been established, and as long as they're still a small company in tech. Our sweet spot is beta product or better, a small team, good understanding of the product market fit. And what we try to do is help you raise money is one of the key things we do. And we work pretty much the whole gamut. Our big focus, though, is sort of angel to Series A, when we do a lot with grants as well. So we're a little different than a lot of accelerators in that we don't offer any space. I don't know what's going on. We don't do, most of them do cash for equity. We don't do that as well. We don't have a programmatic element. We don't do any training. And we don't have a limited time. So I was one of the founders of Tech Futures Group, founded in 2012. And I'm still working with companies from about 2014. Accelerators typically are much, much lower time. So all we have that's similar to an accelerator is great advisors. We don't do the work for you. We advise you, but we don't do the work for you. So if you apply for a grant, we'll review your application. We'll help you figure out which grant to vote, but we won't write the application for you. So these are the areas that we provide assistance with. The big ones are fundraising and pitch preparation, manufacturing, financial modeling, government grants, and IP, intellectual property. Our funders and sponsors, SBA and the state of California, want to see three things from us. We focus on the first. The first is capital infusion. Any money that goes into your business that's not directly related to revenue. So in our world, it's mostly equity and grants. We do some debt as well, loans. And then the other two are jobs and revenue. If you raise $1 million, you're likely to hire someone, so jobs will go up. You're likely to get to market more quickly, so revenue will go up. So we focus really on capital infusion. So the way it works is you apply to Tech Futures Group, we review it. Edgar Cerrone is the associate director. He's there in the back. If we like what we see, we'll pair you with an entrepreneur in residence, serial entrepreneur who's had a good exit. They provide strategic business advice, CEO level advice. And then, can you click for me, please? And then they will introduce you to our specialty advisors if you need them. And those are IP, manufacturing, grants, and then financial model. So you're at the center of our world. Here's our EIRs. They have a variety of experience. They're all very senior. They've all had a good exit or two. They're all high net worth individuals, all investors. The patent attorney, we have a single patent attorney. He does IP in general, it's not just patents. Manufacturing, we do a lot of medical, very specific, very difficult manufacturing to do. We will build a financial model so you understand your business better, and then we'll do a lot of grants. Okay. Here's our results. Last year, we've had about 40 million in capital infusion, so that's basically grants and equity. About 10 million of that was grants last year. We advised about 235 clients. Since the beginning, we've advised about 700 clients. So that's what we've done. Capital infusion is about 195 million. I expect this year we'll probably help companies raise closer to 60 million, maybe 70 million. So that's us. I'm going to be in the back. I'm eager to get started on this, and just come and see me if you need, or send me a text or email. Thanks.
So thank you again, Jerry, and Tech Futures Group. Without further ado, let us welcome up the man, the myth, the legend himself, Daniel. He is a burst contributor. So Daniel, take it away.
Hi everyone, I'm Daniel Jones. You want to pull up the third one? Very great. So who here has heard of dApps or decentralized apps? Can we get a show of hands? Who here uses one on a daily basis? All right, you see there's a problem there, right? Today we're going to go over some of that. We're going to talk about decentralized apps in comparison to traditional software application development and some design implementations to further help the adoption and uses for decentralized apps. What will we discuss? We're going to discuss the differences. We're also going to discuss the architecture, the on-chain uses, some use cases, and adoptions. We're also going to discuss how DApp changes could bring about further adoption. Again, as this crowd just told us, no one here uses a DApp every day. When was the last time, say, show of hands, who used a DApp in the last week? So what does that tell us? That no one's using them in any consistency, right? So that should tell us that they're not providing the services or a feature that they promised to set out to solve. This is alarming, however, this is an indicator of growth. This started happening also in the Web 1.0 phase, where there was only so much that PHP could do with HTML and Perl. And some changes had to come around, some drastic changes. And that's when we had the birth of Web 2.0 and the changes in the mobile integrations that we see today. That did not come because things weren't making money. That came because there was no more ability to be able to use the software in a meaningful way that encouraged people to use it. And that's where we're at right now in the space, and that's what we need to figure out with dApps. All right, so right here is two examples of commonly used non-decentralized applications. I'm going to walk you through this so that it makes a little sense, and then we're going to see what a dApp looks like. The reason it's important to understand this piece is to understand the correlation between a centralized application or a standard application deployment versus a decentralized app. So as we can see here, to the end user, all they see is a user interface. On the back end, either it be business logic, i.e. whatever APIs you're calling on that back end, whether it be decentralized internally through microservice architecture, or whether or not it's using a business logic front end like SAP or something else that gives you an interface to a data that's available to your database. Each of these are acceptable methods of deploying an application in your traditional software sense. Matter of fact, 99.95% of your applications you use on your phone are represented here, as well as some of the apps you use on your mobile device or your personal devices, such as your laptops. And strikingly, more and more use online authentication and licensing models, this becomes even more prevalent because these are the types of checks that are involved in using your software. Now, here is a sample layout of a D app. And what we're going to see here versus this previous app is we're not going to see this layer of microservices. We're not seeing business logic. However, there is a parallel. And that's right here, whether it be, in this case, using the DApp web browser, using an HTML JavaScript invocation, or it could be a Rust invocation, C++, any type of program that you build, as long as it's not utilizing microservice architecture to an endpoint controlled by a third party, right? So the goal of decentralized applications was to prevent businesses from being able to control what you can and can't do with the application. This is important to note because as people are starting to see today, Facebook monetizes off of you. And that's dangerous because it never ends well for you when you're the product. And the reason why is because this costs money to execute and to run. This is why services like AWS, Azure, GCP, which is Google Cloud or Cloud Platform and everything like that, or compute platform. You have all of these cloud services that exist to be able to facilitate this at scale for a business in today's world. In the 1990s, a company would need to buy hardware to be able to do any of this, right? In today's time, they just spin up cloud infrastructure to emulate this. On your local machine, when you're attempting to do a DApp, or you're executing a DApp, you're going to have to rely solely on whether or not they can communicate with the service that they intend to interact with. What I mean by that is that every blockchain has a thing called APIs. Who here is familiar with APIs? Every blockchain has an API. If they don't, then you shouldn't be using it because that means it's not programmatic in any way. So the ability to interact with the chain via either RPC, REST calls, or whatever method your chain or the chain of choice decides to use, in this case, it's Ethereum, and so we're using RPC. We see here that the interaction goes between the EVM and dealing with the blockchain itself. Now, what people need to understand is that when you are interacting with a blockchain, your interactions are really limited to read and write. And what I mean by that, either you're reading data from the blockchain or you're inserting data from the into the blockchain. At no point besides a transaction being executed does any other node on that blockchain care. Because there's nothing being done. You're just querying data against yourself or a public peer. Now, what you need to get behind is to understand that in that notion, it is essentially a database. And as we build applications and DApps today, what we're starting to see is erroneous entries onto the chain itself. I'm not going to call that company out or their DApp out, but there is one that I saw a demo that they literally record you moving the mouse as a transaction on the chain. Now, you would not normally do this on a database in any way, shape, or form in a game or any type of service because it has a cost. This is part of what development and forecasting and building out applications, we commonly refer to it as a TCO model. That's the total cost of ownership for me to run this service. How much is it going to cost at scale? What this is going to look like 6, 9, 12 months down the road. Problem is that in this decentralized world is that we have to execute these things called smart contracts. And those smart contracts require gas. And what gas is, for people who aren't familiar, is a way of rewarding a node for execution. It is essentially a transaction that occurs to who gets priority on execution. And that's important because you can pay a high gas price and guarantee that your DApp gets priority. Think of it like QoS. You're basically paying for guaranteed getting through versus someone else who's paying a lower fee. So you can also think of every transaction on a blockchain in the same way. You can volley to be first, or you can wait to be last. Your choice. It's pay as you play, right? So one of the things that, one of the things that happens in this model though, is as we can see here, there's that web browser. Now there's a problem with the web browser being the normal method in which you get into a DApp in any way. The reason why that is because web browsers are notorious for being vulnerable to several exploits. And when you start talking about private keys being slung around and signed transactions on or in a browser, you have serious concerns for the security because a lot of JavaScript implementations in browsers are horribly done and aren't done up to spec And a lot of them have serious bugs caused by this. And so what we have to do is we have to figure out, in our traditional model here, typically the business owns the back end. So the business is responsible for what happens on the back end with the logic, with the account structures and the system that sets up its users, right? When a DApp, that system is it's basically being centralized to the chain in a distributed model. However, there's no way of guaranteeing safety of the user due to the fact that now you have software running on a remote node that you have no control over. So as a DApp developer, one of the things you have to keep in mind is what the user may be running. And if your DApp doesn't allow for your user to copy and paste the keys, you're doing it wrong just in general. One of the problems that we're seeing with this, with the browser model, browsers can only do so much. But also, they're novel ideas. And this gets back to why we want to use a DApp. So it accomplishes a task you need. This is like traditional software. But again, the DApp that a few people here raised their hands to use, what did it do for you? And was it a one-time task that you wanted to see if it could do, or if it's something reproducible that you would need it to do? Did anyone here find a striking or a compelling use case to constantly use a DApp? No. So what does that mean? That means that the features that it's supposed to provide to us are something that we may not be able to be provided in a centralized app. However, in our case of using it, we found that it's not even filling the niche of what we wanted. So we need to understand that uses for a DApp are super important. However, they're at this point very novel in the implementation because people aren't using them. And I'm going to go over that in a moment. So in a DApp, it utilizes a smart contract or an autonomous transaction instead of a centralized service, typically to be able to maintain and manage what's going on within the DApp. Now, this is a problem at scale, and I'm going to go over that in a few moments, because at scale, people aren't writing contracts and checking them. They're actually just copying and pasting them and changing a few lines, which is dangerous because what happens when vulnerability is found in the one that was used as the source? They're in every one of them. Because typically people don't like to actually do anything original when it comes to changing a smart contract because one, uncertainty, and two, it's still such a new technology that people are still very much afraid of being able to write anything complex with them, right? Think about this as early days writing in C, right? The 70s, people learning to write C. Very basic functions became like, things people passed around in secret at meetups and drinking with their friends because that was worth money because a company paid some guy, a bunch of money or some woman a bunch of money to write a function. And that function was useful to everybody, right? So that's the other advantage is that DApps, a lot of them are open source, but you don't see that problem. But what you see is as we write these smart contracts, these people who are writing the really complex ones are keeping that information, unless they're broadcasting it to the chain, they're keeping it very much closed off because there's a lot of uncertainty about what the behavior looks like at scale. Because right now, you can do some very elegant contracts. But what happens whenever 150,000 a minute are being executed? What does that look like? Well, that's a very dangerous thing to consider because how many nodes do you have? What's the processing look like? And what's your throughput going to be? What's that look like whenever you have heavy users? So right now, some of the biggest use cases are like storage. That's been one. Dice games has been another. There's tons of DApps that are dice games. And speaking of top DApps, so let's see, we have 3 games, but most of those are poker, Vegas, or a bank. So what does that tell us? That people aren't necessarily using DApps for anything other than entertainment, which I like to see that people are using them for games. However, are we just putting random transactions on the chain, and what's that look like, again, at scale? Because right now, as we can see here, EOS is putting out a large number of transactions, 1.7 million on this guy right here, EOS 9, so over a 7-day period. Well, you can see there, that looks rather interesting, but it's rather erratic. It's not a consistent use. Almost looks like someone's testing it, right? Things like that. So you have to be very, very mindful of these things. Like GOC here had a good run for a few days. But again, notice those patterns. There's no stable use. And that's again, the representation of what's happening. So again, problems with DFs. Use cases are at most novel. At scale, even the users feel, based on a survey and some talking with individuals who aren't programmers, they're saying, no, why did I need to put my information on the chain? What good is it on the chain versus keeping it on someone's database if it's a private chain and I have to use their token to use the service? And that brought up a very interesting point to me, because at that moment, I realized literally they're attempting to bypass what a conventional software gaming business would be doing. By the way, it's perfectly legal for you to issue your own digital currency like King does for games such as Bejeweled and others, right? And Candy Crush, because you're not actually maintaining a value outside of your game. So there's like this whole legality piece that works in your favor doing that, by the way, just tossing that out there. Now, you could accept cryptocurrency as a form of payment, which is a lot easier to do both on the books and integration-wise. So now, in EVE, one of the problems is the gas price keeps going up. And that's an issue, because that means as a business or as a company who wants to write a DApp, I now have to do forecasting. And going back to that TCO model, if gas prices are unpredictable, how am I going to know what it's going to cost the user? Well, that's where we get a little interesting, right? Because in a traditional software, conventional software you use every day, how many here have Netflix? How many here have Hulu, YouTube Red, Spotify? All right, great. So you're using a service that you're prepaying for. And we get that model in conventional software. And this is where some of the issues with being cumbersome come into play. What I mean by being cumbersome, and this comes directly from users, okay? If I need to install 2 plugins, set 3 private keys, and KYC to an exchange to use your software, your user base just dropped by 95%. Why? Because I can use something else that required me to click a few buttons and pay them through some service, whether it be PayPal or directly with Bitcoin or something else, and literally being able to be able to use that service without having a KYC or anything else. I mean, there are now exchanges requiring you to live stream while you withdraw. And I want that to sink in a minute. You don't even go through that with the bank. Okay, you could go to any ATM, put your card in, punch a pen, boom, you're pulling money out, right? On these exchanges, if you go in and buy this token, you need to use this DApp. You may actually have to give a lot more information than you would ever need to even open up an online bank account through companies such as Ally and others. I literally did a use case and tested this. I needed more to buy certain ICOs and STO offerings to use some of these programs and these DApps than I ever needed with the bank. And that says a lot about how things have turned into a negative side. So problems with centralized apps, because not everything is rosy over there either, is that they monetize on you, the user. You are their product. Don't believe me, that's how they pay for it. Because it ain't free. You got people who work on stuff, you got people who are writing code, managing infrastructure, designing products, and designing the changes that you get implemented every week, month, and likewise for the updates. Now, this line right here is becoming a dangerous problem even in DApps, which is that they're being centralized and controlled by an entity and no longer falling under the category of decentralized. There's a lot of ICOs and a lot of these DApp companies now that require you to make standard calls to their API, which again, at that point, you're just using an application and you shouldn't even need to be putting anything on the chain. Because the whole point is either you're using the on-chain services or you're not. And if you're not, then why even put anything on your chain or add those transactions, just accept it. And then that way you get rid of a lot of legal liabilities too, right? Because once your token gets listed on an exchange, you now have a whole group of friends called the SEC who are going to be looking at you. And you know, they're very nice these days. I hear good things about them. All right, so So the lack of insights of what's being done in centralized applications has also caused some concerns. Now, I will point out there are even open source products where issues started happening on the locals. One of them being Signal, because people didn't know what was happening with the actual encrypted messages, and it was leaving them in clear text, even though it was open source. That also tells us a lot about people not actually validating open source projects and going in and checking these things, which is also an indicator of problems that exist in DApps. So just remember, Signal being a largely used and largely deployed centralized open source, not centralized, but open source application that's widely used by millions of people has problems such as that, very basic problems that should have been caught. So that raises further concerns about the DApps that you're using, and you should be cautious, but you should also understand what you're getting into prior to use, right? So the other problem with centralized applications is advertisements, because monetization matters. And I'll leave that one at that. So what if your app was a DApp? So think about it for a moment. What if Netflix, what if Hulu, what if all of those apps became DApps, meaning you pay it as you go? Now, one, do you think it's going to be great to open up your bank account and see 400,000 transactions for a penny every half hour because of your streaming? That's divided up by a month? That makes no sense, right? It makes no sense. So what happens whenever the contract and execution costs go up? Now your monthly subscription just went up astronomically because someone else decided they're going to launch a product and had 10,000 people use it one day. Now all of a sudden, that one day of streaming now costs 6 times what it cost you for the entire last 3 years of Netflix. Why? Because smart contracts. Remember, they change, gas prices go up. You either pay or you can't use the service. So if you want to use the service, you have to pay. So would it be better to see those transactions, like I said? Or would it be smarter to move to subscription models in the DApp world? Now people say, oh, well, how can you enforce certain policies? Easy, same way you do with any other application stack. Create a user service, create an ID that's associated to that user. User sends money, if balance checks equals go. Oh wow, what did we do there? Oh yeah, we didn't launch an STO, we didn't launch an ICO, but we're able to maintain and manage a DApp execution that could be managed that way or provide better software use and still incorporate using the chain if and when we needed it. See, this way we don't have to ask the user to give us the key. Instead, the user has the key to be able to send and pull back as they want, because no one's going to load a DApp wallet with $4 million to use a DApp. They're going to load it with $10, $20 worth of coins, $50 worth of coins at top. And that's the way it should be. Because you should also have more than one wallet, by the way. Just in case anyone was on the fence, it's okay. Everyone's fine with you having 30, 40 wallets. It's okay. There's millions, or actually there's quintillions of them that are yet to be generated. By all means, start taking a stab at them. So, using the prepay model will simplify onboarding, because instead of needing to go through 3 layers, now all I need is to set up a user account, send money to wallet I can use. I don't need their token. I don't need to install 30 different pieces of software and KYC. Now, people may say, oh, well, that's going back to a centralized model, and you're partially right. However, I need to understand what I'm doing, i.e., is this service supposed to be on the chain? Is it appropriate for me to keep a 28-minute video literally on the chain? Probably not. Why? Because I'm pulling that data. Someone's going to be getting very angry if I'm pulling from public peers, various things like that, not to mention no one's getting paid for the read, so then they're going to be pissed because bandwidth. So there's some problems. However, if you're doing like most of these people in the Cool Kids Club today using IPFS, you also still have to remember that someone somewhere has to keep a copy of that, and that it just doesn't run on pixie dust and unicorn crap. I mean, literally, there's still nodes that are connecting, running this stuff. So smart contracts at scale are largely copy and paste, as I mentioned before, and this leads to serious concerns, again, for the future. Because again, we're looking at 1970s C development, and this is a real problem. And the reason why that's a problem is because these are built on assembler, just as C was nothing more than a fancy way of writing assembler, compiling it back down. Now, as we see here, we can learn from the traditional software model, and we should also consider whether or not a smart contract is absolutely needed. This goes back to design. APIs can usually handle most of what you need done, and it would be a wise choice if you're building a DApp for scale, and you're going to plan to have a lot of users. It might be smarter to use API for a lot of your executions versus on your own node versus having to rely solely on smart contract execution. This can affect your TCO as well as your future outcome of users onboarding. This is my information if you want to contact me, and I'm going to open this up right now for questions. Does anyone have any questions? Yes. So that's great that you asked that. So I like to use a system of PGP or GPG, and for easy access wallets, I keep them on a machine and on a USB drive. And by easy access, they usually have a less than X dollar amount that I feel comfortable leaving on there, and then I access those wallets accordingly. Think of it like a debit card. I issued a debit card, sent some coins to myself, and that way I can control how much is compromised if that key gets compromised. It's going back to operational security and understanding that. That's a topic for another day.
Wouldn't it be almost like $100 in cash,
Correct. So in her illustration, it's essentially keeping $100 in your wallet. I mean, that's what you're able to do. But also, people have this tendency to think that you can't have multiple wallets. I don't know who started that. I don't know where it started, because Satoshi even said don't keep more than 50 coins in a wallet. Yes. So and that right there reminded me of the PGP thing that I just stated, okay? People talk about, well, they want security, they want privacy, right? GPG is only one step added to your email to guarantee some forward-facing secrecy between you and your other person that you're communicating with. People don't use that. They're not going to jump through 4 layers just to be able to use it. So is there any more questions? Go ahead.
Where do you see the major shift, or do you think that there will be a major shift towards DX? What will need to happen, or will we see that transfer?
I think once we can break through these ideals that we need to pay as we go and everything needs to be on the chain, you're going to see a compromise where you're going to see some pieces of it facilitated on the chain, some facilitated locally only, and that's going to be the future of DApps, is where you're going to start seeing not necessarily everything being executed by a transaction, only the meaningful stuff, and you're going to see this larger array of things being done locally, and like the save model, right? Like you finish doing what you're doing. Yeah, so you're going to start to see that, and the reason that's going to drive adoption is because you're going to have easier onboarding. And once you have the easier onboarding, adoption goes up, and you're going to see people get creative in making everything one button push setup, no longer jump through hoops. And that's when you're going to see that shift.
Do you see any major corporations shifting, or who would be the first ones?
Well, right now, the biggest thing that's being done is blockchain as a service. And that should tell you a lot about what the business side that sees that. So anytime you run something as a service, that literally implies that, okay, you understand what it's supposed to do. Think of it like Redis, right? Redis is a great tool. Amazon hosts Redis, but they're not actively caring too much about what Redis is doing as long as the service works, because that's where they're making their money. Corporations are worried about making money, first and foremost. So for them, right now, the blockchain is this, it's a great idea. The problem is the implementation and the practical use cases have not been exemplified enough to be compelling for them. And it's going to take a lot more than a few DApps to change that. You're gonna have to show people how to do instant networking, instant meshing, these kind of things, and it's not gonna have to require KYC and a few other things for users to be able to be like, all right, I support this. So IoT with blockchain, I think that it's smarter to use a database, and I'll explain to you why. So on a blockchain, you have this thing called a mempool or a UT store, various names. Basically, it's the collection of unconfirmed transactions, right? And the scope of a blockchain is I'm supposed to be able to submit a transaction. Everyone here is supposed to be able to get it in their mempool, verify it if they're a miner, and add it to the block by verifying as well that the block is valid, okay? At a point in which I need to be adding things instantly, a mempool then becomes no longer useful. Because then I'm just worried about getting my synchronized transaction running with my endpoint. We normally would like to call that as a database. because I'm going to get faster read and writes through there. And I can even have validation using HMAC and accomplish the same task that the blockchain is using whenever you bastardize it enough that you're worried about speed and concurrency only. Because at a point you start mimicking other technology and it doesn't mesh well. Because proof of work still has to be completed if you're using proof of work. But if you're staking, you can utilize that. But at that point, once you're using a centralized consensus, why not just use a database and get millions of transactions per second or per minute throughput versus being hindered down to 100,000 or 200,000 tops? So I'm glad you brought that up. There are a lot of businesses that offer API interactions through trustless models that don't use a blockchain. You do that every day with Twitter, you do that every day with Google, you do that every day with a bunch of companies. It provides you a series of data that you can request through API. Okay, so if we're looking at a blockchain, the point of a blockchain is that we're keeping everybody honest, right? But trustless integrations don't necessarily require a blockchain to be trustless, because they're not necessarily trustless because the integration of that blockchain may not be trustless in nature. Because see, if it's a proof of stake coin, you can't necessarily say it's trustless because you're trusting that your staking is valid. You're trusting a lot of stuff there, so is it really trustless? No. So what you would have to do is use proof of work. Okay, so you're gonna have a bunch of little IoT Raspberry Pis firing off some execution of a SHA-256 for the transactions back and forth? No. I mean, that doesn't make sense from scale. Yeah, because money is what's driving a lot of things. I will bring up the BitTorrent token the other day. $7 million in 7 minutes for a KYC service for you to seed on BitTorrent, which you can currently do now without that token. Just tossing that out there. I'm not even kidding. Like, this happened, what, Thursday on Binance. So that was a huge thing. So that again is an indicator of what the majority of people see it as. One more question. All right. So a DApp is the actual front end and everything that entails the use of the application to the end user. The smart contract is the logic that executes on the chain. And what that means is that you have this assembler, you have bytecode, machine code, depending on chain and depending on whether or not they support certain specs of certain contracts, each one is slightly different. So you have to be aware of that. But a smart contract executes on the back end without you knowing because the conditions met for that contract to execute. Meaning you use the smart contract because you fired an execution to wallet A then sends money from your wallet because you agree to multi-signature send it. Yes, you can actually interact with smart contracts through nothing more than a transaction, because that's all they are. You can inject one via transaction and you can execute one via transaction. The interface depends on the chain, so each chain is slightly different. That's why I brought that up. So in some cases, you may interact with Ethereum with like Solidity, right? So you would write a contract with Solidity, it would go down to the actual assembler, and then you would have to post that in as a transaction to execute on the EVM. And that's the lifeline of how those work. So there's a difference between that, and if you want to get into some further disclosure of like showing you the code and stuff, I can do that after the next speaker. All right, well, thank you, everyone. And thank you, Hacker Dojo, for having me.
So we will, it's mixops@protonmail.com. Thank you again, Daniel. And I just want to let you guys know we have a 5-minute break. And when we come back from the break, we have Justin Wu presenting, and that'll be very exciting.
Yeah, thanks for the intro for that. Let me see the slides. I'm originally from down in LA and decided to get rid of my apartment and start traveling around the different blockchain hubs and jurisdictions. Was in like Asia for about 4 months, New York, spent a little time at SF, but then went to like Malta, Amsterdam, London to take a look at what's going on across the different fields. I've been involved as CoinState. We help a lot with the marketing and growth. Initially it was ICOs, and then now we're transitioning. We did a lot of, now focus on a lot of DApps, games with community building, and even really helping a lot of these blockchain companies out now to think about how to actually generate revenue, even if it's like a service or some sort of offering to continue on with their runway and help them to survive, because it's getting really rough out there, both in terms of runway and the cost to maintain the teams too, and there's not a lot of real users and customers out there. And my background's always been in marketing and growth. And I also helped co-founded the first Seattle Blockchain Conference, which I was born and raised up in Seattle. We had Daniel and the Burst team and a few other, we had Bittrex up there, Boeing. I would say that Seattle's still a very small, young community, excited, but enterprise blockchain focused. So. And there's more opportunity there just because there's a lot of developers up there, but they don't really care about blockchain quite yet. So we're still continuing to try to build that ecosystem up, even in Vancouver and Portland too, partnering up with the University of Washington, University of Oregon and beyond to build infrastructure out there as well. And so that's why we've launched Blockchain Northwest to help jumpstart the community out there, especially since there wasn't much happening over there. And then further expanded up to Vancouver, BC, Portland, Phoenix, and down in LA we merged with Blockchain Beach, which is the largest LA blockchain community down there. And our goal is really just to continue on educating and connecting people. And like the biggest thing that we always seen out there with the conferences too, it's the people are charging thousands of dollars per ticket for industry. For ours, we charged started at $100 with students at $50. Again, like a full day conference, really just to open access out there and leave that open. So that's kind of been my background in that front. And for me, I've also spoke at a lot of different, as I've been traveling, I'm just sharing my insights from working with a lot of different companies out there, and hosted a few other more specialized events out there. Like we've hosted one event at the NASDAQ back in November with Brock Pierce, Jeremy Gardner, and a few others to talk about the future of security tokens and STOs and beyond. And we're looking to, this year, focus not so much on trying to deploy events on large, like big conferences, like a Consensus or Bitcoin NA Miami, but to instead focus more on industry-focused events. So it'd be more meaning like healthcare and blockchain. Even if it's like 50 or 100 people, if we can pack the room with just healthcare professionals, C-level execs, and connect it with blockchain companies, then our job is done. Same thing with like gaming. Gaming's been and esports is another big thing that we're looking to do something during GDC as well as E3. So definitely stay in touch. We're looking to help more focused, laser-focused events out there. And all our events is going to be recorded as well as streamed online. And we're also launching an online summit too. So just trying to, again, open up the access for education in the space as well too. So yeah, today is I talked really about the state of blockchain, at least from my perspective, from traveling and working with a lot of different various types of companies, from STOs, stablecoins, DApps. Last year, 2007, 2018, just been seeing nonstop implosions from companies and scams, exit scams, and founders that really shouldn't have ICO'd in the first place. And I say that from a lot of experience, even working in the startup space. You see, it's like seeing founders come into the space that had a failed startup, couldn't even get funding, and that's why they all turned to ICOs for funding. And we're seeing like headlines where $46 million ICO founder is, charged with fraud in New York with like Shopping Token and beyond. And it's been nonstop out there. And especially in the bear market, everybody's looking for somebody to blame and the blood out there. But despite the empty promises, we're obviously seeing ICOs taper down, STOs kind of ramping up in preparation, but they're all pending regulation, especially if the SEC is not shut down. But yeah, it's been completely slowed down. We're not really seeing many activity out there, at least locally in terms of ICOs. I think that there still are ICOs, especially heavy activity in Asia, which I'll cover about a little bit later, but the activity overall is down. But in terms of like enterprise interests, I think that some people are asking like, well, who are the different use cases of private blockchains and development out there? Here's like a quick chart from Gartner out there, but as we can see, like the biggest use case is obviously financial and fintech services, and the lowest is like healthcare and pharma. Even though healthcare and pharma obviously really needs blockchain for data and all their systems and inefficiencies out there, but I think this is like really following the graph, just like even outside of blockchain. I think that in terms of like just tech and early innovation adoption, historically healthcare and beyond are just like slow to adopt, whether it be for politics and whatnot. But in terms of like the types of MVPs or proof of concepts out there, financial and government is kind of like the big use cases to date. And there's a lot of different applications for blockchain out there, but I'd say that this year has been heavily on the infrastructure year. For those that haven't been following, the only real first enterprise implementation for these type of private blockchain solutions is Walmart and IBM going in and doing salad tracking throughout the chain. And there's a lot of other potential use cases where something like a Rolls-Royce is trying to track their engines throughout the performance of it and put it on the chain too as well. But this starts bringing up in a very interesting conversation too now, and that's where I was talking at the Boeing private blockchain summit that they had. And the question really comes down, and this is why I think that we're going to see even more delays in the next even like year or two, is they don't know who's responsible to create and lead the charge for the private blockchain. Is it the Boeings? Is it the Alaska Airlines and Virgins? Or is it the Rolls-Royce making the engines? Who's trying to solve it for each other? And I think that right now, in terms of like the leader, it might have to come from the top, somebody that has full control of the chain, supply chain, in whatever industry that they're in, to then try to ban others within that chain to help, or at least comply. I mean, Walmart is strong enough to tell everybody within its, like all the farmers to get along in this program, or they just don't get, they won't be part of this, be part of their sales and supply. So it's been interesting to see in that use case. But when I was talking at Boeing, that was really interesting to see is like, they finally got approval of some funding to do some tests and innovations for different experiments across different departments. And they just finally got that approved from Q4. And then now they're in the, since they got finally approved, now they're in the research phase to decide which blockchains or protocol they should utilize for each of the different departments. Every department will love different things. Some people love Hashgraph. Some people are looking at Hyperledger and all these different options. And it's still early on, especially for these enterprise blockchains, before we see real mass adoption or mass integrations in there. Because I think that, especially with the price being down low, there's been a lot of skepticism still in the space, and also too the strategy for some of these the people who are leading, let's say like a Boeing blockchain project. They're going to go for the most easiest, low-hanging fruit proof of concept ever. And they're not going to go for some super big supply chain to track all the vehicle parts to steel manufacturing down the whole chain, because that's just too hard to prove that it's going to increase or uplift efficiency. And it might not, and it's just going to be too there's not enough funding necessary to go pursue that. So they're going to go for something maybe super simple like employee data or or some sort of work data tracking, just to show that there's interest or use cases for blockchain, but and then get approval for the more bigger projects to deploy on the second level of proof of concepts. So just because of that simple fact that if they're going to go and spend a whole year or two to develop a easy proof of concepts, then a big company like Boeing or even Raytheon and others it's going to be years, at least from my perspective. And they don't necessarily have the teams to go build, and IBM is questionable for them, for some of these guys out there, because IBM is very strong in marketing, but they saw what happened with Watson, and so there's a huge distrust in terms of actual execution on that front. So they're trying to mobilize their own teams, but the talent has been a little bit hard, so it's going to be a push and pull to try to get these out the door. So it'll be interesting to see these more other applications where like Amex is trying to tap and create a reward system based on purchase behavior and beyond. So there's a lot of different use cases still being tested theoretically, but it'll just take some time on the private blockchain side too. Same thing with Volkswagen. Again, this is like a clear use case. They want to track your vehicle data, the miles, the VIN, etc., unique to that, and be able to keep a full historical record, especially in countries that where people are always clocking down the miles and tricking people. So it's a clear use case. And so, but one interesting thing that I'll say though, from talking to some of the big, especially the enterprise blockchains, is that it's still 50-50. Like there's still skepticism why blockchain versus database, but for those that are pushing for innovation for those pushing for innovations and trying to attempt to integrate blockchain into their at least tests, their reasoning is they don't want to, it's more like FOMO and fear of missing out. They don't want to be the last person integrating and figuring out blockchain out there. And so they've seen, they understand disruptive technologies, but they're still learning right now, and they are putting like Volkswagen and Amex, they are kicking it off to these innovation hubs or innovations accelerators to at least experiment, so that they can at least learn and research as they go, even if they all fail and whatnot. So it's all learning for them too, early on. And obviously we've seen this year, I think that actually even Fidelity announced recently that they're going to start to look into opening up their platform in March. The BACT is getting constantly delayed, I think, for the futures, and but Ameritrade is also gearing up too. So this year, we're going to see a lot of at least the roadmaps and infrastructure for Wall Street to potentially get in, but at least they're just setting up the gateways. They're not necessarily going to move money in. We're seeing a lot of reports with like a lot of people who are head of institutional capital and markets for like blockchain.com and a few other different blockchain companies out there are getting laid off because they're just not seeing any traction on the institutional side, as the Wall Street and New York is not believing, especially seeing prices just keep going down low and low. So in terms of like traction, I think that we'll have to wait and see these bigger, stronger guys come into the space and open up and then help educate and push the space forward. But until then, they're just going to continue. And I think they're all going to, like BACT just raised like 150 million new cash on that separate company to go and pursue that. And so I think that they're just right now quietly building as they should, and try to prep for the next run. And when the run comes, they're all ready to go so that they're not missing the opportunity. And obviously everybody is waiting for regulation to happen, but that's where like T0 is just going on ahead, and they just finally opened up their platform to at least buy and sell T0 tokens or T0 shares or whatever they call it for their platform, as well as a quick test. So we'll see that, security tokens and STOs and institutions are, at least the roadmaps is being in place, but what we're also seeing too, though, is the more other interesting gateways is essentially everybody wants to create the Coinbase of Uganda, Coinbase of Philippines, Coinbase of Vietnam, etc. If we notice, like, look back at the most recent like $20,000, $19,000 Bitcoin bull run, the really only big volume in terms of countries involved was like China, Korea, London, UK, the US, and then maybe some other other countries out there. And so you think about it, Africa wasn't involved, Southeast Asia didn't discover crypto, and then Korea kind of discovered it maybe 6 months before the bull run to pump it up. And so what all these exchanges, whether it be like Bittrex, Binance, Huobi, OKX, they're all trying to create offshoots and partnerships with each jurisdiction in different countries. And so like Binance, they'll create a whole new company, Binance Uganda, work with potential local partners or banks or financial institutions as a JV, joint venture, and hopefully the government or without the government as well. But they're trying to create the fiat on-ramps for this year and next year. And so that's been a huge recurring theme. And CZ from Binance said that he wants to open up essentially two currencies of fiat trading pair on-ramps per continent by the next year too. So right now it's just like the exchanges are making all the money still. Binance is just making a killing every month. And with profits of $1 billion during like a whole crash, and so they're just reinvesting into the infrastructure, so that again, if we saw that Bitcoin went to 19,000 and not the whole world participated in the future, maybe 2020, 21, the gateways are all there that both institutions and retail can just quickly buy Bitcoin and other alts and crypto through an app. Then now the whole world could pump each other up, I guess, in terms of that hype. So it's going to be interesting to see, but that's going to be happening this year. Everybody's trying to build that out. I went to Malta too to take a look at what's going on there. The real benefit about Malta is that the government and the prime minister is super active in blockchain. They have a very easy banking record, banking access, and if you want to meet government officials, you can easily do so. However, I think that we're starting to see that even if you are supposedly based in Malta, and if you're still a U.S. citizen, the U.S. doesn't care. They're still going to get you somehow and block your funds and dictate that. So the only cool thing is that maybe you could, and this is why all the exchanges are there, you can do banking easily, which banking in the States for crypto and blockchain is very hard. There's only a few select banks. So there's still benefits to potentially looking at Malta to host your company. But other than that, if the U.S. government still wants you, they'll go to Canada and extradite you like Huawei. So it's going to be interesting to see how that still plays into effect of everything. Stablecoins. So stablecoins has been on a major tear. There's probably like a new stablecoin every week. Gemini has been obviously pushed by the Winklevoss, but we're seeing, U.S. dollar right now has been super, the most interesting, not interesting, but the most popular stablecoin right now. But we just saw something like AirSwap launched a Korean stablecoin. And so again, it's going to be like another infrastructure arms race. Who can build the tether of yen, the tether of won, the tether of Dubai or whatever. So, I don't fully know the full monetization models of some of these stable coins, but some of them out there are just going and raising like 100 million, and some of them are 100% backed, some of them are algorithmic backed, some of them are not backed by anything like Tether. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. Yeah, so stablecoin, sorry for those that it's supposed to be a coin that it represents the local fiat currency. It's supposed, it's like a 1-for-1. It's like a PayPal dollar. PayPal dollar represents $1. Tether represents $1. You're trusting that the Winklevoss twins supposedly have $1 to match their digital dollar that they have out there. They're using crypto to signify that this dollar is truly unique and there's only one of that dollar to show that it exists. And usually these stable coins will have a monthly or quarterly audit by a third party. Hopefully, it's all about trust, that you have to trust that this stablecoin bank is solvent and they have their money. And you know, something like a Tether, they're not really audited, so we don't really know if they actually have a dollar, but it proves that if people still believe it, then, you know, if they believe it's a dollar, then I guess it's a dollar. Yeah, so this is stablecoins do bring an interesting point, and we can answer your question too, is, you know, people have asked, why hasn't like the Federal Reserve or the US government come and stomp these out? And, you know, there's a lot of different theories and different ideas about it, but I think that what is cool about, like the gold standard is that stablecoins can make essentially allow for a universal digital currency. And if the US dollar becomes the most common traded pair, then that technically solidifies the US dollar into the crypto world, if that makes sense, in some sick way. And so to me, I think that, you know, they're going to let the innovation happen with the Winklevoss and these, and then that's when we're going to start seeing government-backed stablecoins out there. One good thing about stablecoins too is that it's going to allow the fiat on-ramps to come super quick, because let's say the moment you put in like $100 in Coinbase, in the future Coinbase, they can just easily take that money from you, because why not, and just give you 100 GUSD or USDG or GUSD, so to represent, and then at that point, like there's a quick, easy way to just get into crypto in and out. But in the future, hopefully you can pay with some of these stable coins out there. So that's kind of like the idea with stable coins, is that it's supposed to be an on-ramp it could be an on-ramp and off-ramp for institutions to move big money in and out, for traders, and retail too. So retail on-ramp, because you can create the local stablecoin easily. And then that could also enable for global payments too, and remittance a little bit more easier too, potentially, just because when you send a dollar or you send one ETH and then the ETH price just crashed out of nowhere, then then it doesn't really help the person that you send it to across the country or wherever too. So yeah, you have a question?
It's a bit sad, this question.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, clearly it's stable coins are. Oh, sorry. Yeah, he asked the questions like, when we're going to see essentially the unpairing or separation of fiat and crypto, right? And I mean, I don't have the full answer. You know, I don't know all the answers for that. But I mean, clearly with stable coins and the bear market, everybody who's flooding into stable coins. And everybody's praying that Wall Street or the big banks or big enterprises comes into the market to bail the crypto market out. So it's like we need the fiat dollar still. So I think that's, you know, I don't know. Like, I think that stable coins are kind of still solidifying fiat into digital fiat, and governments love this, because especially when you go true USD. They airdrop it to you. You're gonna have to KYC and give, you know, you have to submit your photo, your whole information. And they're gonna have to be like, if the government comes and knocks to Gemini, like they're gonna give away all your data. Like, unless you're a Tether. Tether, again, that's the cool thing about Tether. I guess why people love Tether. It's that mysterious stable coin that nobody knows where the money is at. So that's just like some thoughts about that. And with the way that things are trending. Utility tokens are just not seeing any real spend or utility, so theoretically, people were trying to think about a full barter world, Burning Man world, I guess, where people are just trading amongst each other from these utility tokens, but the reality is that we're not seeing any of that, and the volume is just crashing and being low, and then these utility tokens are being paired to Bitcoin, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens if there's truly any differences out there. And And we see with the private blockchains, they don't even require any token to utilize, right? And they're going to still increase the efficiency. So it's like your logistics supply chain token really might not have any use because something like a Maersk or Walmart is just going to build their own thing without a token. Or if they do a token, it's not like publicly tradable or sold. So that's why utility tokens is like, people thought they were used to barter or trade. Maybe gaming, and I'll talk about that later, is maybe used as that, but I think that stable coins are, are going to be what's utilized for now, and then maybe like a Bitcoin out there, yeah.
So you see, so basically saying that's on-ramp institutional investors.
Yeah, and retail too, again, because like if, let's say like, again, like it's just think about like PayPal, the moment I put it in a dollar, then I get a PayPal USD, that I technically can just trade and sell that digitally now, right? So I think stablecoins can act like that without, because right now you're doing back and forth between USD to Bitcoin to whatever. And one another thing too is that stablecoins could start allowing more unpairing and dependencies of Bitcoin and altcoin price, meaning, it's so right now, like why utility tokens also still have a lot of big issues is that people can't even buy a, let's say, esports gambling token. You have to buy Bitcoin and then go trade into esports betting token and then in and out to cash out, right? And so there's why that's like stablecoin instead. Like if I wanted to go play like an EOS or a Tron game, well then I'll just get like a stable coin and then I can buy, if there's a trading pair from stablecoin to EOS or any other altcoins, Monero, etc., then you're not as reliant to keep jumping through Bitcoin or Ethereum to get into these ICOs or utility tokens out there too. So that's like another, again, there's like a lot of different use cases for stablecoins. STO dividend payouts could be in stablecoins, and there's unexplored applications for that too, so on that side. This is a little bit outdated slide, so what I was going to say for this one, OTC, was up until probably the most recent big like dip and crash, like a lot of last year up until like maybe Q3, even though the price was like crashing and low, like I was just hearing nonstop over-the-counter deals happening at Consensus and Singapore, everywhere. It was just like big money. People are buying like $10 million plus of Bitcoin at a time. Some ICOs are trying to liquidate their coins through OTC too. Don't even name those ones, but like they're trying to get some funding from that. So it's like up until like Q3, like the OTC was going strong. So that was like a potential bull sign because the rich are just accumulating. But that seemed to die from Q4, the big Q4 dip that nobody expected to just keep going down to like 3,200 as well too. And OTC is still happening, but right now I think everybody's just trying to sell to save themselves at the current moment on that side. In terms of like kind of the world perspective, Asia is still on fire. But what I'll say from that is it's just all speculation in terms of trading. There was like a meetup up in the city just a few days ago, SF, from a few different groups in Korea. Just because Korea volume was like 1/3 of all of overall volume doesn't mean that they were actually blockchain experts at all. They're just traders and speculators. Korea like really just discovered crypto less than a year ago. And built all these exchanges out there. And so when you see the projects like Icon that claim to be like a Korea Ethereum killer, they had no experience to actually, they had no real smart contract developers and a concentrated effect. It was just a lot of it was, what I've seen is that these, a lot of these Chinese and Korean and Asian crypto funds, when you take one step back outside of crypto in general, like in the whole startup realm of things, startups is a new concept in China and in Asia overall in general, just because they, traditionally there's a lot of manufacturing and so startups is a brand new concept, but they're going all in on it right now. Like startup grind is like in all major cities in China now, but what I mean by that is that there wasn't an Andreessen or Y Combinator in China to begin with, right? And they're all new, like probably less than 10 years old. And so in the whole startup sense of things, they don't have strong due diligence, they don't have experienced teams, experienced portfolios, they don't even know what to look out for. They just have stacks of cash from America that we give them. And so they're just placing all these bets all over. And when you start digging deeper into some of the biggest coins that really pumped up, like a lot of them were hyped up from, you know, from these crypto funds, these Chinese crypto funds or Japanese crypto funds, or like Icon was pumped up by some of the biggest Korean crypto funds. They made each other all rich, and that was it. Like 1,000, 2,000 plus returns, and that was like the little facade from that. So it's interesting to see how that will continue. What's interesting to note too is that a lot of these crypto hedge funds, and globally, even here in the States, some of them were just like illegal hedge funds or just like 18-year-old, 20-year-old kids creating their own funds out there. A lot of them are really immature, or not immature, just not experienced money or fund managers at all. And so legally they weren't really protected, or they didn't even have like a strong lockup period. Some of them had like 6 to 12-year lockups maximum for their investors. And so we're going to start to see, and this is through conversations with some funds out there, the investors of those funds will, you know, if they can't handle that 60 to 90% loss, they have the right to try to tell the fund to cash them out and redeem their money, whatever leftover money is. And so if you think about it, the many crypto funds out there, Pantera to Polychain and all these other ones, they don't really have cash on deck, but they have a lot of utility tokens and shitcoins and other coins out there, and in the millions too, or huge supplies because they just own it. And if you look at something even like a Tezos, right? Tezos only has like, last time I checked was like 600K worth of volume. And imagine if you're like, you have like 10 million worth of Tezos. Okay, good luck trying to liquidate that, and you're being forced by your investors. It's going to crash potentially tokens, and that's, from some conversations, it's happening soon, at least through waves, and it could be through periods of times, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens when that happens. I don't know. That's a thesis from a few funds that I've talked to in LA and in Asia as well, but it's just clear that, you know, there's like 300, 400 plus syndicates and crypto funds out there, and they just didn't have those strong rules in place to maintain that. You had a question?
So there are some utility tokens that actually have a use case.
Mm-hmm.
Say they're down 90%, and now these hedge funds get liquidated.
Yeah, and
That looks like a great buy now, because the price is going to.
yeah, but the thing though is that how much in the overall crypto market is fake volume too. So that's like another factor. Some people say 50%, 70%. Even if it's like say 50%, then we're all screwed, because people are having market makers or just doing some internal trading just to pump volume. Like, you know, they're just going to trade to each other, right, on their own exchange or their own whatever, just to like clock up the volume too. And to my understanding, that's still, you know, the people that have the cash are still doing it, and just to maintaining that. But then you can clearly see the utility tokens that aren't paying for it are getting like 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 worth of transactions, or they don't have a community that's speculating the trade. So that's just another factor to go in. It's just like, oh yeah, you might see $1 million or $2 million, $10 million worth of volume, but if that's inflated, maybe like a EOS gambling app, and you try to liquidate it, or you try to check the dividend payout, you might not get it out there. So it's interesting to think about. I don't know yet, so it's just something to observe, and just ask some of your crypto fund friends. But just from casual chats, that was a real thing from multiple different funds. You're even seeing just stories of funds that are just, you know, weren't properly prepared. But in terms of like Asia though, it's just like there's still massive activity, and some places still kind of like pack like thousands of attendees are trying to still learn this. But it's just like full hysteria, like crazy mode. Like when I went to Japan, there was like $100 million, $200 million ICOs that fully raised, never heard of them. and they packed the stadium filled with crowds, and they brought Mariah Carey on stage. Like and then I'm like, how the hell did they do this? And the thing about, interesting culture thing about like these Asian countries is that MLM, multi-level marketing, is super huge. And so it's multi-level shilling. That's really what it is. And if you talk to it, like in Japan, it's so hard to get in, especially if you're not Japanese, but then you go hire a Japanese speaker. They call them promoters. They can go and promote and go get the sale done for you. They have their own MLM squads out there, and they can pack those stadiums, and then they just go sell out. Big connect, but even, I'll straight up and say it, like Cardano did it too. Cardano went to Japan, raised like 100 through the ICO promoters. I know because I've utilized some of the same on the marketing side. Like, you know, there's shill squads, there's Reddit bots, there's these ICO promoters. You talk to some of these other Russian promoters too out there, and Cardano had a lot of promoters. That's like the biggest example, because Cardano started out in Japan, but it was started by Charles Hoskinson. He's not Japanese, so he used promotions out there, and then yeah, so that's how like some crazy origins on some of these tokens out there. So it's been interesting to see that happen out there. So I think one of some of the biggest questions too is like, how do we see this evolve in stages to get to that mass adoption? And I think that, you know, everybody's always saying mass adoption for consumers, and I just don't see it. Like, similar to like any other emerging industries, it's going to come from B2B to C, in my whole opinion. But this is just my perspective. You know, it's going to have to come from the top level of government, institutions, and big brands. Why is because they have the community, they have the technology, they have the teams, they have the lobbying, they have the bank and financial access. And in the end of the day, it's like none of these D-apps are getting a lot of adoption. But let's say like Amazon or Microsoft or somebody big, Fortnite comes in, which they're not, but you know, like if somebody big like that comes into the play, then they're going to be the biggest D-app usage out there. And I guess the biggest one this year that's going to open up will probably be Telegram. That's why they raised $2 billion, because they're going to be the largest D-app in the world, because they're going to have technically the most users, next to Tron maybe. Just kidding. But so, you know, like I think that, you know, we're going to see first is like stablecoins are being deployed. There's probably like 100 plus stablecoins, probably more as everybody's going to different countries. STO exchanges are being built. Everybody is building their own STO exchange, as well as advisory. Everybody's coming, instead of ICO advisors, now they're STO advisors without a broker-dealer license and Series 7 and all that stuff. So we'll just be on the watch out for that. What I have been hearing though is that STOs is an interesting opportunity. Real estate is probably leading the charge on that, like real estate tokens or real estate tokens that represent real estate property. Like Kevin O'Leary is doing a fundraise on a hotel and you're going to get paid dividends on the performance of it. Like a hotel, you can't really IPO a hotel or pre-sell a hotel, but you can STO. So real estate is the one that's leading the charge. And then everything else is like, you know, potential games and dividend payouts and performance, but they're still not, you know, not fully there, and fundraising for that is still taking a while. But there are also some very big STO projects that haven't come out, and they are just raising privately. Some of them are like kind of government level projects. Like, I don't even know the name of this one, but it was just like a casual chat with PwC. There's a huge supply chain STO project that had to do with the military, and their only first use case that they could tell me was ammunition tracking, and then they couldn't tell me anything else after that. And that was raising like $100 million plus STO, but I've heard even some like $200, $300 million STOs by some potential big brands that are considering and looking out there. Some luxury brands out there are looking at, like Louis Vuitton and others are trying to do some luxury tracking, and then maybe do like a fundraise on that project. But you know, I think that in the STOs like T0 are not going to let like every single person and STOs come out there. They're going to go for the big brand names that have recognition and trust from institutions and retail investors, and I think that's what's going to help lead the charge. And as that goes, it's going to be the fiat on-ramps worldwide, hopefully. And then finally, maybe enterprise will kick in. Like I said, it's going to be a little bit delayed. DApps, so it's not fair to put DApps as number 6. I think DApps is going to be a progress, and I think that people are going to still keep building and find those use cases. And Hashgraph is going to go finally online in March, I think, and then Zilliqa is going on tomorrow. Zilliqa is going to be one of the first blockchains to implement sharding. And so, we're going to continue to see, potentially the question is really, is scalability the true issue? Or is it that nobody's building anything useful? Or is a lot of the big issues that I see with the companies we work with is that they just don't even have any customers or any connections into the context of whatever industry that they're trying to build in from the first place to actually execute these deals and have customers utilizing their chain. And then also, in the end of the day, why would you pay for a decentralized Airbnb rental or decentralized supply chain when the token price just crashes? Why would you even want to transact into that as well too? So a lot of these utility tokens now, if they want to survive, they either cashed out at the top, or they got they're well funded, or you don't be surprised if they're just going to completely go normal startup mode and build a software that may or may not use blockchain to generate revenue. And I'm seeing that both all over, just to survive this while they're trying to solve their blockchain solution out there. And then the few rest of the remnant clients that I have are companies that are big and well-funded, and they were a real business or startup before blockchain. And blockchain was a potential extra funding for them, or they were an extra innovation advantage that they were trying to do too. So that's what I'm seeing around in terms of that. And then last, we're going to continue to see more scalability and next-gen platforms. But as we see, Ethereum's always being delayed. And then when I went to Bitcoin Miami, I found out that Casper is no longer with Ethereum. Casper Labs spawned out, and they're going to build their own blockchain, I think, or sidechain. I think, I don't know if somebody can correct. I just met Casper Labs, and they're like, oh no, we're going to have to build our own thing. Because Ethereum, I was like, what the heck? That's new to me. And I guess it's similar to Raiden too. Raiden was supposed to ride out with Ethereum, but they did their own thing. I don't even know what they're doing now. So I was just like, wow. I was just like, Jesus. Okay, so we're still, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I was just like, I met Casper Labs, and they're like, yeah, we're fundraising now. So and you might see them at ETH Denver as well too. So scalability, I think that to find, so the biggest thing to consider about scalability is that does it truly need to be decentralized and open source? Hashgraph is going to be full closed source, but supposedly from the development, 1,000 transactions per second. EOS is kind of like a hybrid oligarchy with the block producers, same with Tron with their super delegates too. So in the end of the day, right now, as it currently stands, people hate for slow transactions and want fast transactions. So we'll have to see where the applications will come by. And another interesting discussion too is that it might be a whole multi-chain world where something with low security could be great for maybe IoT or just quick, small transactions. Something where more like a government, they might maybe look at a Tesla super slow but supposedly strong governance on that on their platform. So everybody's still evaluating that, and with platforms like Cosmos and Tendermint just launching their SDK this week, they're making we're continuing to see more infrastructure on multiple blockchains talking to each other through a Cosmos. Cosmos has built internet of blockchains. They created essentially a hub to talk to all these different blockchains for you as a developer out there too, so that you don't have to fiddle around with that. And they're based up in the city too, so you should definitely check them out. They're pretty cool. But there's other projects like that too. But again, they're just heavy tech behind the scenes, and they're only going to be used if people are using these blockchains for that. So it's going to be interesting to see.
One of the things though that we are seeing is that, gaming potentially is being utilized through Tron and EOS, but right now it's like heavily gambling or CryptoKitty level projects. And that leads to kind of the next thing is that people are always looking for blockchain gaming to potentially lead the charge for mass adoption. I'm not a full believer in it. I'm a big time gamer, but I'm seeing a hard time seeing this being a reality. And the reason is a company like Fortnite and Epic Games will never launch their own crypto because there's no reason to, like they don't really need to. And they're not gonna let you, there's no benefit for a Halo or Microsoft or Epic Games to allow you to own digital assets at all, like true ownership, because you're gonna be trading amongst each other and they make no money, and they own the IP, right? Like Disney's never gonna let you own. I own my own Mickey Mouse. No, you don't. So if anything, if there was a crossover, it's going to look more like an STO, more like a regulated exchange or a closed-off exchange. Like the best example that if we're going to get close to any type of gaming, in my opinion, is going to look like Steam. Those are familiar with Steam. You can actually trade cards or assets, and there's like essentially like a Steam stable coin in there too. But the money never really leaves the platform, and they always collect it as well. So we're going to see digital assets. There's going to be a push from the full decentralized gaming side. I think that there's one big company called Mythical Games. They're like an EOS game development studios in Santa Monica and Seattle. And they are building kind of their own gaming platform, and they got like $15 million Series A, and there's some big AAA games out there, or AAA-like games building on Unity and Unreal Engine. But in the end, gamers don't really care truly about owning their digital assets quite yet. As long as they kind of semi-own it inside the game itself, maybe they can trade it, and they might get some in-game currency for it. But to pull that out is going to be very, very hard. You're going to have to get, and those big games are not going to really go into that territory. They might, build their own non-fungible token internally for their own use, but maybe not if there's advantages on the technology side. But it's going to really need a game that is a killer app out of nowhere, like a Minecraft or a Fortnite. Well, Fortnite's by Epic Games, but it's going to take a game to have mass adoption and people to really care about digital assets and trading too, as well too, for that. So that's just my perspective on gaming. Everybody's always looking at gaming as the holy grail. It can, because gaming is going to get that big spike in just users and transacting. The question is just like, can people, there's one thing to do blockchain development, no one to actually create a game, another one to get people to actually buy and use it. And then the next thing that we're seeing is distribution too. And I think distribution is going to be very, very hard, especially as we're going to a 5G and cloud gaming future. And we're seeing that Apple, Verizon, Google, Amazon is going to open their own essentially game launcher or Steam equivalent or a cloud gaming platform. And they will for sure not allow you to trade assets outside of their thing. So if you just look at iOS, you get in trouble for doing that, unless you build something like an Android. But even then, like they still want to fully monetize it. You'd have to like pair off and break off. And so they hold both the devices and big platforms are the ones that are going to try to stop that from mass adoption. But there's always a way, I'm sure, to go around that and more acceptance. Yeah, I mean, I can continue on with more topics too, or if anybody's got any questions, but I don't want to keep you too much more late out here. But hopefully, feel free to just always reach out and connect with me, whether it be email, LinkedIn is one of my most favorite platforms, as well as Twitter. For me, I always create and just document more on the business side of blockchain. So it's not really talking about not really shilling anything except just different conferences and events and who I'm meeting. My content and my own channels are really focused more on like the B2B side of like what's going on in the blockchain space. So I always create like video content and written content on my LinkedIn and Twitter channels as well in terms of like the business side of blockchain. But yeah, any questions or anybody have any questions out there about anything, whether it be different industries or perspectives or anything like that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks.
I'm very sad because I thought like Bitcoin
Yeah.
with
With
something fairly values. It sounds like soul in 10 years, maybe we end up seeing the same type of centralized structure.
yeah.
Facebook's Coinbase owning everything. They're just using decentralized tools and not living in a decentralized world.
Yeah, I agree, and you know, and the quote unquote bailout for crypto right now is Wall Street 2.0 right now. Like everybody's betting on STOs and stable coins and governments and to adopt and big corp to adopt this, which is kind of like against what, you know, the whole idea about Bitcoin. But you know, we'll have to see. You know, I think that it's going to always be a push and pull both sides. I think that, you know, there's always going to be a check and balance, I think, especially with now how things are always forking and you know, more and people who are valuing privacy more will come out, then there's always going to be a push and pull on both sides for that. But it does bring a good, interesting question is like from a mass adoption and user standpoint, and even on an enterprise standpoint, do you truly care about decentralization on the front-facing side if it does the transaction and value transaction that you want and still works, right? And clearly, like Facebook is super centralized, has their own data and sells it, but we still, you know, still use it one way or another, or other platforms, or you don't use Facebook, but you know, so it's just like one way or another, you know. It's going to be interesting push and pull to see where things lies, because back then everybody was talking about decentralized this and that, and now it's like, oh, we're looking back at a semi-centralized or centralized, or yeah, world. Yeah. Yeah, no worries, thanks. I was free to chat to you.
Thank you all for coming out tonight. Thank you again, Hacker Dojo and Tech Futures, and hope to see you guys at our next blockchain lecture series, which will be next Wednesday. Yes.